business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
You're talking about the energy system, so I'm going to go straight to Christophe because he's the architect of the International Energy Agency, is one of our good partners as well. They're the World Energy Outlook report, and one of the dilemmas that we have on the continent is we invest in all of this sort of transition architecture, but then the economic growth is not necessarily linked into that overall play. So here, as you can see from the, thank you, John, from the Just Transition Investors Alliance, we're actually linking growth, procurement, demand, enfranchisement as one system. And our expectation is that that should ultimately create that virtuous opportunity for energy systems to be invested in. I mean, $4.6 trillion worth of human capital endowment, carbon credit headroom for the continent as evaluated by the African Development Bank between now and 2030. This is an opportunity to securitize that, make it strictly business, but also let the world benefit from Africa and Africa benefit from the world. But I'd be interested to get your very specific view on how this initiative could positively impact the transition and the investment in the energy system.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Hubert, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this great panel. It's a real privilege to be here for the launch of the Just Transition Investors Alliance, and it's a particularly important moment for it. There's a huge amount of different aspects when we talk about just transitions, but I would like to just focus on two, picking up some of the numbers from our recent World Energy Outlook, because we are in the middle of the first ever global energy crisis, and it's having huge impacts on oil markets, gas markets, and it's causing severe damage to the global economy. And it's the vulnerable who are suffering the most. And in particular, for the first time in decades, we expect that the number of people in the world who don't have access to electricity is going to increase this year. So around about 75 million people who previously had access to electricity will lose that access because of the increases in prices of electricity. And similarly, 100 million people who previously had access to clean cooking will lose that access and have to go back to much more polluting fuels. So when we think about just transitions, we need to think about how do we bring that access to people radically and in the time frames that the world has set itself by 2030. We estimate that it would take around about $25 billion per year to ensure that there is universal energy access to electricity and to clean cooking by 2030. 25 billion is not a huge sum of money, but we're falling woefully short of that. The second, or another key aspect of a just transitions is about being part of the new global energy economy that's emerging. In response to the crisis today, we are seeing a large number of new policies being put in place by governments around the world. The US Inflation Reduction Act, the EU Fit for 55 package, Japan green transformation, and a lot of momentum in China and in India. And this will really boost investment, clean energy investment going forwards. About a 50% increase in global clean energy investment, $1.3 trillion to $2 trillion by the end of this decade. However, nearly all of that increase in investment is in advanced economies in China. And there is a real risk that emerging market and developing economies, particularly economies in Africa, will be left behind and won't be able to be part of the new energy economy. We've heard lots of here in the previous panels about the reasons why this investment is not taking place. For me, the key reason is the cost of capital. We've done a lot of analysis of the cost of capital in different parts of the world, and today the cost of capital for a new solar plant in Africa is about 7 times higher than it is in advanced economies. 7 times. But that's where, when we're talking about multilateral development banks, when we're talking about blended concessional finance, all of these things are essential to bring that cost of capital down. Because Africa really does have huge opportunities for future energy economy. 60% of global solar resources are in Africa, yet there's only 2% of solar capacity is in Africa. If we could just tap a small fraction of that solar potential, that would give universal energy access and also help bring us new fuels. There's a huge potential for hydrogen produced from solar, for example, and if we have the investment into these new technologies, that can then start to become part of the fuels that we all use around the world, and new economies, new jobs, new industries that will be formed. So just to finish, it's great to see the Just Transition Investors Alliance. Really, if we can get this right, there's a huge opportunity there for governments, for companies, for investors, and of course, for people.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.